Hello everyone, in this short video I'm going to talk about how to select the criteria to evaluate your policy alternatives. So suppose you have defined and refined your problem. Now the problem you try to address is very clear to you. Then you come up with several policy options or alternatives to try to solve the problem. Then what's next? Now you need to decide which alternative is actually the best option, right? But based on what? Based on a set of criteria. Now we have some commonly used evaluative criteria, which is based on personal judgment or one's belief, etc. Right? So, but definitely some evaluative criteria are more important than the others. They weigh more. And while the others are commonly used practical criteria, these are your constraints, right? So evaluative criteria could be, in theory, very ideal, while the practical criteria are gonna bring you down to the earth. All right, so criteria also can be used as a logic construct, especially when you think about a set of constraints and then how you can actually maximize your subject or your goals. Now, the other issues related to this is if some of the criteria actually quantifiable, then quantify them, specify the metrics. And also you need to avoid confusing alternatives and criteria because that will not help you to clearly address the problem that you want to solve. All right, some of the commonly used evaluative criteria include efficiency, right, like cost-benefit analysis. This is basically the most commonly used evaluative criterion. While you also have equality, equity, fairness, justice, freedom, etc. Now, these evaluative criteria, you need to somehow prioritize them while not consider all of them in practical when you are evaluating your alternatives. Right? Otherwise, it's probably too complicated for you to handle. Now, generally speaking, we would say some evaluative criteria weigh more than the others. How this happen, right? If it's in a democracy, generally speaking, the political process takes care of it. You have your representations, you elect the politicians, then through the debate, deliberation, voting system, then you decide which criteria should the government prioritize. So sometimes that's taken care was taken care by the political process. Well, the other issue is the analysis, right? If you are policy expertise, then you can impose a solution. Say, okay, that should be weighted more based on a set of reasons. And the distribution of rights precludes some solutions and forwards the others. Now, remember this. In this world, there are very different political systems. So you have authoritarian regime, you have democratic society. So these operate in very different logics. Okay, because the distribution of rights is just too different. All right, so some of the things happened in the authoritarian regime cannot be applied to democracies, obviously. So vice versa, right? So when we talk about the distribution of rights, you need to consider about different political systems. All right, suppose you get the evaluative criteria. You think, okay, I'm going to think about the cost-benefit analysis, and I'm also going to take care of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also secure individual freedom, etc. All these good things, right? However, you need to consider the practical criteria as well. Suppose all of the things are great based on evaluative criteria. However, they are not legal. Then, of course, that can't be a choice. Unless, there's one exception, unless your policy alternative is to change the current law, right? So then enact your aim at enacting a new law, then that might be a policy alternative. But other than that, you need to obey the law, right? So that's just the reality. And also you need to consider political acceptability. Now, especially in United States, you have Democrats, you have Republicans, and basically they can't agree on each other on anything, right? So if you can't create something like bipartisan, then it's probably very hard for you to gain political acceptability, right? You need to consider whether or not it will be accepted. And also you need to consider the administrative robustness, right? Whether or not the current administrative system can implement it efficiently if this is the policy alternative you are choosing. Now, sometimes in the United States, you have a very unique federal system, federalism, right? So you have federal government, you have state, local, and if the policy alternative involves all different levels of governments, then it's quite complicated, right? So when you say this policy is supported by some of the state administrators, however, in reality, the federal government can't give it too much support, then it's probably not that robust. Right, from the administrative branch's perspective. So you need to consider this as well. And also, very importantly, you need to consider whether or not this is sustainable, the policy. So one predominant example in the United States is regarding all the healthcare policies. Right? So you have Obama administration come up with a health policy, while that's been changed during the Trump administration. Now you have the Biden administration try to restore it. So if you are aiming at something like making the society a healthier society and make people healthier, however you are constantly changing the policy, I don't think the long-term goal will be achieved without policy sustainability. Right? So this also you need to consider about this. Now, of course, this is related to the political acceptability. Right? All right, let's talk about other considerations around criteria. So criteria can be used as logic constructions like linear program. I'm going to give you an example to show you what do we mean by linear programming. So as I said, if possible, you need to quantify your criteria. If that's possible, then specify the metrics. And you really need to force yourself to focus on those specific criteria, because that's gonna help you to avoid those confusing alternatives and the criteria. Anyway, if these are confusing and not that clear, it won't help you to solve your problems. All right, so practically, we must prioritize them, right, and focus on one primary criterion, a principal objective to be maximized or minimized. So all the positive objectives, right? So for instance, I want to save money, then of course you need to maximize it, right? Or on the other side, minimize the costs. And social equity, then let's maximize social equity or freedom, secure people's individual rights, etc. Right? So all these good objectives, then you need to maximize them. While on the other side, if it's like inequality, injustice, then you try to minimize the degree of these negative objectives. All right, so let me show you an example of linear programming. Basically means you are going to maximize the subject, to a set of constraints. So the example looks like this. Maximize the number of homeless individuals housed on any given night, subject to constraints of not exceeding 50,000 per night total budgetary cost to agency X, and not putting shelters into neighborhoods A and B for political reasons. Now this is related to political acceptability or political feasibility, right? Whether or not that's actually politically feasible. And trying to give more choices to the beneficiary population as to where they will take shelter. All right, so constraints, here's actually two different constraints. One is efficiency, this evaluative, right, cost benefit analysis, because you have a budget constraints, 50,000 per night. And you also have a very practical constraints. That's from practical criteria standpoints. So not to put shelters in neighborhood A and B for political reasons, right? So this is political acceptability or political feasibility. All right, budgets, cost benefit analysis, political reasons, political acceptability. So one evaluative, one practical criteria. Now, as I said, if possible, right, quantify it and then specify the metrics. Then some of you might argue, okay, this is my alternative, and the criteria I'm thinking about is really hard to quantify, and even impossible. I can't think of anything that can be quantified. Then you probably can categorize them if that cannot be quantified. All right. So by categorizing them, I mean you can put it like, this is the short-term goal and mid-term goal and long-term goal, right? So you kind of put them in an ordered category. And also you can say, okay, this is my low-end solution, this is my medium-level solution, and this is my high-end solution. Kind of break down the unquantifiable objective into something that can be ordered, put into categories, right? So that will help you to specify the metrics, and also help you finally solve the problem. All right, finally, let's talk about something called criteria metrics. For this, this is just to give you an example. This is not a fully inclusive one, right? So here my example is I list three different evaluative criteria and three different practical criteria, and then put them together. Now, for instance, for alternative red, we consider efficiency and legality, as well as freedom and policy sustainability. So this is maybe the red case, right? So you have two alternatives. For the first one, you use efficiency and legality to evaluate the alternative one, and for the alternative two, you use freedom and policy sustainability to evaluate policy alternative number two. All right, so this is a red case. While in the green case, for instance, then you have three different alternatives, right? So for the first one, you use efficiency and the policy sustainability to evaluate it. And for the second one, you use equality and the political feasibility or political acceptability to evaluate it. And for the last one, you use freedom and the legality to evaluate this one. All right, so you can try to do the exercise, try the yellow case and the blue case. But my point here is sometimes you think, okay, one side, either from the evaluative or from practical, is just not enough, and for a particular policy alternative, you think you must apply several different criteria, and from both evaluative and practical criteria side, then a matrix might help you to clear your minds. Right? So I'm not saying, okay, you have to use for each policy alternative, you have to use a criteria matrix. It's just sometimes it's very difficult and very complex. Then you need a matrix to help you. All right, I think that will be all for this short video. Thank you very much.